1.3 Cardiovascular system. The cardiovascular system has various functions that it carries out. There are 6 important functions that enable our bodies to respond to the daily demands and especially in sport. These include delivery of nutrients, waste products removal, transport of oxygen, clotting and protection from infection, and lastly thermoregulation. The first function is delivery of nutrients. Nutrients such as glucose from digested carbohydrate are delivered from the digestive tract to the muscles and organs that require them for energy. Also, hormones from endocrine glands are transported by the cardiovascular system to their target organs, and waste products are transported to the lungs or urinary system to be expelled from the body. Nutrients are important in physical activity as it allows you to perform well. It also reduces the risk of injury and illness and ensures the best recovery after exercise or a training program. Another important function is the removal of waste products. The CV system works with the respiratory system to deliver oxygen to the tissues of the body and remove carbon dioxide. In order to do this effectively, the CV system is divided into 2 circuits, which we'll discuss later on in the video. It also removes lactic acid to stop muscle cramp and soreness. The CV system carries out protection from infection. Red blood cells are responsible for transporting oxygen around the body to the tissues and organs that need it. As oxygen enters the bloodstream through the alveoli of the lungs, it binds to a special protein in the red blood cells called hemoglobin. White blood cells detect foreign bodies or infections and engulf them and kill them. When they detect and kill an infection, they create antibodies for that particular infection, which enables the immune system to act more quickly against foreign bodies or infections it has come into contact with previously. Platelets are cells in the blood which are responsible for clotting the blood. They stick to foreign particles such as the edges of a cut, and platelets connect to fibrin, producing a dump that blocks the hole in the broken blood vessel. On an external wound, this would become a scab. However, if the body has a low level of platelets, then clotting may not occur and bleeding can continue. Lastly, the CV system controls the temperature of the body. Temperature changes within the body are detected by sensory receptors called thermoreceptors, which relay information to the hippocampus in the brain. When a deviation in temperature is recorded by the hypothalamus, reacts by initiating certain mechanisms in order to regain a safe temperature range. There are 4 sites which these adjustments occur. They are in the sweat glands. These glands are instructed to secrete sweat onto the surface of the skin when either the blood or the skin temperature is detected to be above a normal safe temperature. This allows heat to be lost through evaporation and cools the skin, so blood that has been sent to the skin can be in turn cooled. Another way is through the smooth muscle around arterioles. An increase in temperature results in the smooth muscle in the walls of the arterioles being stimulated to relax, causing vasodilation. This increases the volume of blood to flow to the skin, allowing cooling to occur. However, if the thermoreceptors detect a cooling of the blood or skin, then the hypothalamus reacts by sending a message to the smooth muscle of the arterial walls, causing the arterioles to vasoconstrict. Skeletal muscle helps by shivering. Shivering has lots of fast, small muscular contractions, which produces heat to help warm the blood. Lastly, the endocrine glands may secrete hormones such as thyroxine, adrenaline, and noradrenaline. These hormones all contribute to increasing the body's metabolic rate and therefore increasing the product of heat. The cardiovascular is divided into 2 circuits, known as the pulmonary and the systemic circuits. The pulmonary involves blood that circulates from the heart to the lungs, then back to the heart. Systemic is the blood that circulates from the heart to the body and muscles, then back to the heart. Pulmonary is made up of the heart, lungs, pulmonary veins, and pulmonary arteries. Veins carry the blood towards the heart, and arteries carry away. Deoxygenated blood leaves the systemic circulation when it enters the right atrium through the superior and inferior vena cava. The blood is then pushed through the tricuspid valve into the right ventricle. From the right ventricle, blood is pumped through the pulmonary valve and into the pulmonary artery. The pulmonary artery splits into the right and left pulmonary artery and travels to each lung. At the lungs, the blood travels through the capillary beds on the alveoli, where respiration occurs, removing CO2 and then adding oxygen to the blood through diffusion. The oxygenated blood that leaves the lungs through the pulmonary veins, which returns to the left atrium, completing the pulmonary circuit. Once entering the left heart, the blood flows through the bicuspid valve into the left ventricle. From the left ventricle, the blood is pumped through the aortic valve into the aorta to travel through the systemic circulation. Delivery oxygenated blood to the body before returning again to the pulmonary circulation. In the systemic circulation, oxygenated blood from the lungs leaves the pulmonary circulation when it enters the left atrium through the pulmonary veins. The blood is then pumped through the mitral valve into the left ventricle. From the left ventricle, blood is pumped through the aortic valve and into the aorta. The aorta arches and branches into major arteries to the upper body before passing through the diaphragm, where it branches further into arteries which supply the lower parts of the body. The arteries branch into smaller arterioles, and finally capillaries. Waste and carbon dioxide will diffuse out of the cell into the blood, while oxygen in the blood diffuses out of the blood into the cell. The deoxygenated blood continues through the capillaries, which merge into venules, then veins, and finally the vena cava, which drain into the right atrium of the heart. From the right atrium, the blood will travel through the pulmonary circulation to be oxygenated before returning again to the systemic circulation. The heart anatomy. The heart in our bodies is an important organ as it pumps the blood around the body and provides the body with nutrients such as glucose, and it can be used in aerobic expiration. For example, during any sport, the muscles need oxygen transported to the muscles in order for them to contract to make the body move. The heart has three wall layers, epicardium, myocardium, and endocardium. Endocardium lines the insides of the heart. Myocardium is the cardiac muscle and is the thickest layer of the heart. The microscopic appearance of cardiac muscle shows branched fibers and intercalated discs. The epicardium covers the outside of the heart, and pericardium is the membrane lining the pericardial cavity which surrounds the heart. The atria in the heart is thinner myocardium than ventricles. This receives blood from the body and from the lungs, and it also transports blood downwards into the ventricles. The bicuspid valve allows blood to flow only one way from the left atrium to the left ventricle, and is more commonly called the mitral valve because it has two flaps and looks like a bishop's mitre or headdress. After the oxygenated blood flows from the atrium to the ventricle, the valve closes to prevent blood from flowing back. This valve has only two flaps, which gives it the name bicuspid. The tricuspid valve opens to allow blood to be pumped from the right atrium to the right ventricle. This has three flaps, so it is named tricuspid. The chordae tendineae are cord-like tendons that connect the papillary muscles to the tricuspid valve and bicuspid valve in the heart. The papillary muscles are muscles located in the ventricles in the heart, and they attach to the cusps of the atrioventricular valves in the heart. They attach to the cusps of the atrioventricular valves via the chordae tendineae and contract to prevent inversion or prolapse of these valves on systole. The aortic valve closes off the left ventricle that holds the oxygenated blood before it is pumped out of the body. It opens to allow blood to leave the heart. The pulmonary valve is opened by the increased blood pressure of the ventricular systole, pushing blood out of the heart and into the artery. It closes when pressure drops inside the heart and is located in the right ventricle. The cardiac cycle consists of alternate periods of contraction and relaxation. Contraction is also known as systole, and this is when the blood is ejected into the ventricles. For example, when blood is ejected into the pulmonary trunk and the ascending aorta. Relaxation is also known as diastole. This is when the chambers in the heart, such as the atria and ventricles, are filling with blood. The overall cardiac cycle takes 0.8 seconds, which is just one heartbeat. Diastole takes 0.5 seconds, and systole takes 0.3. In the conduction system, there are various components, the first being the sinoatrial node, which is where the stimulus contraction is generated by pacemaker cells. From here, the impulse follows three different paths through the atrial walls to reach the atrioventricular node. The AV node then spreads an impulse down the bundle of hairs and then onto the bundle branches, which eventually goes up the Purkinje fibers to spread an impulse through the ventricles and start a contraction from the ventricle to the atrium, i.e. the bottom to the top of the heart. During atrial diastole, the atrium ventricles are relaxed. The semilunar valves are closed as blood flows into the left and right atrium via the pulmonary vein and the vena cava. Pressure then rises and forces 70% of the blood to passively fill the left and right ventricles, pressuring the blood through the bicuspid and tricuspid valves. The atria contract, forcing the blood through the ventricles. This atrial systole. The atria then contract and force the remaining 30% of blood through actively by an impulse from the SA node. When the ventricles are full, the AV valves shut to stop backflow into the atria. During ventricular systole, the ventricles contract to force blood out of the heart, where the semilunar valves are forced open. At the end of this contraction phase, the SL valves snap shut. Systole takes 0.3 seconds and diastole takes 0.5. The autonomic nervous system has an influence on the cardiac cycle. The autonomic nervous system contains two main parts, the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system. The sympathetic preganglionic fiber sends an impulse to the sympathetic ganglia. This then conducts an impulse and sends more norepinephrine into the second synapse to bind with adrenergic receptor. At the second synapse, the SA and AV node are located. When this occurs, an increase in the cardiac output happens, for example, the heart rate speed, an increase in contractility, automaticity, and conduction velocity. The parasympathetic system starts with the preganglionic fiber, which conducts an impulse to the synapse where acetylcholine is released. This synapse is in the intramural ganglia. This will bind to nicotinic receptor, which then occurs an impulse to travel down the postganglionic nerve to the terminal axon, which releases acetylcholine into the synapse. This binds to a muscarinic receptor, which decreases cardiac output. The vagus nerve supplies motor parasympathetic fibers to all the organs except the adrenal glands from the neck down to the second segment of the transverse colon. The accelerator nerves increase the rate and strength of the heartbeat and therefore increase blood flow. Blood vessels transport blood through the body. There are 5 types: arteries, arterioles, capillaries, venules, and veins. Blood carries out many functions such as transporting oxygen, removing waste products, thermoregulation, clotting, and protection from infection. Blood contains plasma, and this is the liquid, cell-free part of the blood which is said to be straw-coloured. It is 9% water and is 55% of the total volume of blood. It dissolves hormones, glucose, and other nutrients. Red blood cells, erythrocytes, have a lifespan of 120 days and are a red pigment, so are red in colour. They have no nucleus to make more room for the oxygen, and they contain hemoglobin in the cytoplasm. They are circular, so have a large surface area for gas exchange. White blood cells have a lifespan of hours and are larger than red blood cells with no hemoglobin. They use the bloodstream as transportation to the infected area and can produce antibodies to destroy germs and can engulf phagocytes. Thrombocytes, which are platelets, have a lifespan of 7 to 9 days. They are the smallest and colourless, and they have no nucleus. They form a scab to prevent blood loss, and they release enzymes when they come in contact with the air or fatty deposits. Arteries such as the pulmonary trunk and aorta, etc., have more elastic fibers than smooth muscle fibers. Veins and arteries both have 2 further tunics and capillaries that surround the endothelium. The tunic media is composed of smooth muscle tissue, while the tunica externa is connective tissue. The elastic tissue supports and stretches the blood vessels, while the smooth tissue helps regulate blood flow by altering vascular resistance through the vasoconstriction and vasodilation. The arteries have thicker, smooth, and connective tissue than veins to accommodate the higher pressure speed of freshly pumped blood. Veins have thinner walls as the pressure and rate of flow is much lower. Capillaries only have 1 tunic. This single layer of cells is the location of diffusion of oxygen and CO2 between the endothelial cells and red blood cells. Arterioles have a high level of smooth muscle tissue to enable vasoconstriction and vasodilation. Vasoconstriction leads to an increased resistance and decreased flow through the vessel. On the other hand, vasodilation has an increased flow through the vessel and a decreased resistance. Capillary beds entrance are regulated by precapillary sphincters, a band of smooth muscle tissue, and this relaxation of a sphincter allows for increased flow. Constriction decreases flow, and control is located through autoregulation. Venules have 3 types of wall layers. The inner layer is built from endothelial cells, which permits the passage of fluid and white blood cells. The middle layer is then smooth muscle tissue and elastic tissue that helps the vessels can maintain shape. The outer layer is the tough and fibrous of connective tissue that binds the entire structures together.